And I think when the academic light bulb goes on, that people are going to be going, oh my God, like, what have we done? Like, we've been ignoring this for so long, and there's so much opportunity in it.
Hello, I am codyellingham, and this is the Transformation of Value podcast. In this episode, I talk with Dr. Murray Rudd, an environmental economics and policy researcher by training, and now science advisor for Satoshi Action Education, providing input on economics and environmental science as it relates to Bitcoin. We discuss Murray's background and work, his new project, the Bitcoin Distillery, which is a resource for following and understanding developments in Bitcoin. And finally, we explore the way the academic world can engage with Bitcoin in terms of research and collaboration opportunities. Now, if you would like to support my work and growing this show, please consider tipping some Bitcoin to the show's wallet. Otherwise, pass this episode on to a friend who you think may enjoy it. If you have any questions or feedback, please reach out. My emails are always open. hello@thetransformationofvalue.com. Otherwise, on to the show. How have you been, Murray?
Oh, pretty good. We've had a really warm summer here. Well, warm, it's been like hot, like not like Atlantic Canada at all. So it's been nice in some ways, but it's been really hard sleeping because nobody's equipped here with proper air conditioning. So it's just like I've been a little bit of a zombie over the past couple of months.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm in Japan and it's incredibly hot in August. We've had 37, 38 degree days in Tokyo, south of Tokyo. And I think, would you classify it as an El Nino system that you're experiencing up your way? Or
No, it might have some relationship to that,
Okay.
but it's just North America, the weather patterns have just been all messed up. So I don't know if you heard, one of our mountain tourist towns out in Alberta burned down.
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, Jasper, up in Jasper National Park. So, well, it wasn't the whole town, but it was about around 30% of the city burned. Well, the town burned. It's only 8,000 people. But yeah, we've had really, really weird weather the last couple of years. And we had wildfires here in Atlantic Canada last year, right at the beginning of the season. Like, so we had a wildfire that came right into the city of Halifax out in the suburbs in late April of last year.
Yeah. And are those plantations or like native forests that are burning, or?
We're in sort of that Canadian Shield muskeg bog type of terrain here. And so, yeah, it was probably logged off a long time ago, but it's like not, it's pretty scrubby forest land out in the outskirts.
Yeah. I thought perhaps we could start with a brief overview of your career and how you came to be working in Bitcoin as a science advisor for Satoshi Action Education, please.
Well, that's a little bit of a long question, actually, partly just because I'm older, but I'm Canadian, so I was raised out on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and I was always very interested in sort of the fisheries and forestry conflicts and environmental management. And that took me into an undergrad program in environmental studies to begin with. Eventually, after dropping out of university a number of times, onto a master's degree in agricultural economics. I spent about a decade in salmon farming and aquaculture out in British Columbia. And then from there, I went and started a PhD program eventually after finishing my master's, and spent a bit of time in Indiana with that. And my PhD dissertation was on Caribbean reef fish conservation down in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And my PhD is actually from the Netherlands, Wageningen University. So I did this really like a very long route to get into environmental studies. I went into academics, so I was a professor in Canada and the UK, US, and Sweden, and then left academics in early 2019. So very sort of my professional side has always been coastal and oceans focused, but environmental studies, environmental economics, and environmental policy. And then Bitcoin was interesting because I followed the tech, I followed tech. I've been a tech investor for a long time. And I also was sort of in tune with some of the sort of the early online discussions with what was going on in different areas as far as libertarianism was going at that time, and different sort of technology trends. So I heard about Bitcoin fairly early. I didn't get involved with it. I can remember the Bitcoin faucet and thinking it was a scam and losing out on 5 Bitcoin per day that they were giving away, unfortunately. And from there, it was more into, got interested in blockchain technology generally because of professionally, I did a lot of work with endangered species and endangered coral reef fish in particular. And there was traceability was always a big issue. So the idea that blockchain might help with traceability was interesting. So I sort of dabbled in the idea and tracked it. And that, of course, Bitcoin kept coming up a number of times over the years. And I think in 2014, 2015, it came up again in one of our horizon scans, one of the research activities that I do. It came up as a potential way to use excess waste gas from electricity. So it was a very early flag on the potential environmental benefits of Bitcoin. And then it came up a couple of times again. And I tried to open accounts. I tried to open an account when I was living in Sweden. I tried to get an account in London. I was rejected. And the only way to buy Bitcoin was either through an ATM that was 30% premium, or to trade with some sketchy guys in in St. Petersburg or something like that. So it was very hard to get Bitcoin for me for a while. And then eventually things sort of clicked and came together about 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I just want to go back to what you started with, talking about your work with agricultural economics, aquaculture, these things, because as you know, I'm from New Zealand and we have quite a strong agriculture base. And as an island nation, it's important to kind of understand how you can be sustainable with these kinds of things. And certainly there's been a lot of conversations recently about how to be more productive, more sustainable with agriculture, and to a degree there is some aquaculture taking place, and also here in Japan there is salmon farming and other things taking place. As you probably know, there's actually some world leading research happening on fish farming in Japan. But I'm just wondering, this is quite an interesting space to look at things from environmental studies and agriculture. So maybe just dwelling on that point a little bit more. What's the broader picture here for the importance of environmental studies, understanding these kind of ecological systems, etc., kind of coming into this new world that we're heading into with everything? Yeah,
well, in some ways it's a new world, but if you're old enough, this has been around. Like these conversations have been going on for like basically 50 years now. And so I just to give away on my age, I started my undergrad environmental studies program in 1979. And at that time we were like very aware. Well, at that time the big problem was acid rain. And climate, like the climate change, ozone depletion was an issue for quite a while. And but my interest in particular, coming from aquaculture, was I'd worked in Southeast Asia. So I was in the Philippines for a couple of years working on an abalone farming project, actually. And there, and especially in Thailand at the time, companies were cutting down all their mangrove swamps along the shoreline and putting in prawn ponds. And so, to me, that just seemed like a completely crazy thing to do, because you were taking away your productivity of your fisheries, your offshore fisheries and your coastal fisheries, for the sake of building, very intensive aquaculture facilities. And so that was one of the things that got me into thinking about going back to school, because even like at 30 years old, I didn't even have my undergrad degree. I sort of got sidetracked a number of times along the way with work and with consulting, and got married in there somewhere. So there was different things going on that I had this professional life before I went back to school. The other thing on the aquaculture side that I found really interesting was just crop rotations. So I had salmon farms that I was running, and I didn't understand personally whether it was best from an economic perspective to keep the small fish and let them try to catch up to the big ones, or to harvest off the small ones and just let the ones that were performing well, go ahead and do their thing. So that was a very natural sort of lead into agricultural economics. So when I went into the Ag Econ program, once I was in it, then I started to get more interested about the environment, which is something I'd been interested in from, right from when I was a kid, basically. And so there's a number of different areas where environmental economics plays into our land management. And we have all these questions. My interest is in external costs and externalities, and how do we put value on the environment when it's not traded in markets. So a lot of the work I did was with constructing, basically doing survey research to construct demand curves that could start to inform about, well, how much did a person actually value the preservation of an endangered species?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, it's a very similar case, certainly with some of my other work focusing more on land-based agriculture, but the role of pesticides and fungicides and things, and sort of how resistance builds up over time, and how you cost that in. And there's been quite a lot of work done in New Zealand around that, moving towards a lighter touch with how you do things, using beneficial insects. And it's a whole technical topic to go down, but I think it's very interesting because certainly Bitcoin mining is kind of, again, that physical footprint, the physical side of the Bitcoin system and the Bitcoin network. And it seems like there can be some real connections here. I mean, we were talking about fish farming, aquaculture, and I know here in Japan they had the first bluefin tuna that was farmed probably about 10 years ago, which is incredibly hard to do, as you know. There's other systems that maybe require warmer water. Bitcoin mining can help with that. So I'm keen to maybe move on to talking about the Satoshi Action Education, which is your current work, and sort of what you guys are focusing on there, and how it connects with the environment and Bitcoin mining.
Yeah. Satoshi Action Education was set up by Dennis Porter. And so there's two organizations. They're both nonprofits, Satoshi Action Fund and Satoshi Action Education. Now, I'm not American, but there's a difference in the structure, the way that the companies were set up. So Satoshi Action Fund is actually involved in lobbying. So if you see Dennis's posts on X, a lot of it's about the right to mine legislation that they're helping to promote. There's different initiatives that are going on. He's always on the road doing something. Now, one of the things and why Dennis and I sort of connected, about a year and a half ago, was that he had found that going in and dealing with legislators and lawmakers that peer-reviewed research was actually very important. And so, and especially looking at the environmental side of things, there was a lot of, everybody that's in the Bitcoin space knows that there's been some pretty terrible academic papers that have been published in the past. And so there was an interest from Satoshi Action to create Satoshi Action Education, which would have a couple of different objectives. And one was to produce peer-reviewed research that could demonstrate the potentially positive environmental aspects and impacts of Bitcoin. And we've also had the goal of trying to encourage other people other authors to get published within the field, because getting published is very important when it gets into, we can talk about this if you want to, but the short version is that if you're a published author in an academic journal, then odds are if somebody has an academic manuscript submitted to a journal, the editor will look around for potential reviewers. So they'll always look to people that have already published in the subject area. So we hope to get additional people, help people publish in the area. And then we also work directly with people in the Bitcoin industry, in the mining industry. So I've done methane mitigation modeling paper, which is currently out in review. And so I guess it's the Satoshi Action Education goal is to aggregate and synthesize and help create new Bitcoin evidence about Bitcoin's potential positive benefits.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, you mentioned there's been some quite shoddy research in the past, and it's often that these pieces are picked up and used to justify certain incorrect points of view regarding Bitcoin and in particular its energy use. I mean, let's talk more about the importance of solid academic research here, because it seems like it hasn't really happened in the past. It's only beginning to start to emerge through the journal system. I mean, when was there really the beginning of a sort of actual objective explorations of what Bitcoin means from an academic perspective?
Well, in some ways, there's not even right now. Now, certainly on the finance side, there's been papers going back to 2014, 2015. I'm in the process of doing a reserve currency paper right now for Satoshi Action, so I'm delving back into a lot of that literature. There's a lot in the computer science and the technical side that's being published in the past. But on the environmental side, there's a much more limited number of papers. And part of that is just, for your listeners to understand the research process, to get something published, usually in an academic journal. I mean, it's a long process. It takes, so if you imagine that you're in a traditional academic position and looking for grant funding to conduct Bitcoin research, you might you develop a proposal for like a research proposal that then is submitted to a funder. Typically, your first proposal never gets accepted and never gets funded. Most times, most people will have to go through, if you're going for a grant like in the US, the National Science Foundation, or the equivalent in other Western countries. The proposal, well, maybe you might have like a few months lead time. It goes in, it gets reviewed. That's 6 months at least later, if not 8 months or longer for some larger grant proposals. You get rejected, you have to go back, you have to do the whole process again. Maybe you get funded the second time. Maybe it's even the third time. So it can be 2 to 3 years before you even get funding to conduct research. And then once you conduct it, then you have to hire, normally, like for a large research project, you're looking at hiring PhD students or postdocs. It takes a while to get them up to speed. So you're looking probably a year and a half, optimistically at a year and a half before you get your first journal submissions in. And then once you go into the journal submission process, that can easily take another year to get an accepted article and something published in a journal. So you can be looking, you add all these stages up. And it's not uncommon at all to go, 3 to 4 years from the inception of an idea to actually having your first academic output. So that's one of the reasons that we aren't seeing environmental research coming out in Bitcoin. Now, there are a couple of exceptions right now. There's a group, an engineering group up at Cornell University. There's also groups down in Texas, at Texas A&M, and I think at universities of Texas as well. There's a couple of other groups that are starting to do energy-related research, and there's Bitcoin papers coming out from them right now. And I don't know these people personally, but to me, what it looks like is they've had grant money, like they're fairly large labs, and they've had very substantial grant money that's come in. And it looks to me like they probably had a PhD student or a postdoc that was interested in doing some Bitcoin research on the side, and they were able to slide some money or some time for the person to go and do this. I'm not aware of any academic institution in the US or in Canada that has yet gotten a big Bitcoin research grant. And that's really what you need to really get the academic research rolling. So there's some structural things going on here, and hopefully we'll start to see some more projects coming, and then some more outputs coming, but it might still be another 2 or 3 years. In the meantime, what we have is we can have like these hard, sort of the very empirical academic research papers. That's one side of the equation. And then there's also the perspectives piece and the opinion pieces, which is what we're concentrating more on right now. And it's also what people like Alex DeVries, Digiconomist, has done in the past. A lot of his pieces are published as perspectives pieces, just because they're easier to get through peer review. and they're more about opinions rather than the really hard empirical evidence that's really needed to support a lot of the to build that evidence base that we need for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and the last piece you just mentioned, the Digicom piece, that's one of these notorious FUD pieces, is it not?
Alex de Vries is he's worked as a consultant for the Dutch Central Bank and as an employee. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I've actually seen there's some pretty good work that's come out of some people from the Dutch Central Bank in finance. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. He doesn't have a PhD, and my understanding is that he's been working on it part-time. So it's really like it's sort of this real anomaly in academia, because normally he's published a number of his pieces on Bitcoin electricity use and lately Bitcoin water use in some very high profile journals. And that's normally you don't get the chance as like a sort of a solo PhD student to do that. So it's like there's some really unusual things going on there. And I think part of it was probably just because he was very early in the process. And the journals, or the group of journals that he published with a lot of these high profile articles, is called Cell Press. And Cell Press, their editorial process is such that they have a fairly large staff. Some journals are all academics that sort of work on a volunteer basis. Some of the larger journals have like very substantial editorial staffs. And I think, Cell Press recruits a lot of articles, so it might have been more that there was somebody in Cell Press that didn't, had an inkling about Bitcoin, and they might have actually been going shopping for Bitcoin articles early on. And then once, one of the very typical things in academia is that once you hit into an area where you have some success, you just keep on pounding away at it, just because it's really good for your citation rates, and you carve out some expertise in the area. So Alex de Vries, I think my impression is that he's just sort of fell into this just at the right time for himself, and that if he was trying to do like the similar sorts of publications later on, maybe they wouldn't fly, but because they were early and they were interesting and they drew a lot of attention for the journals, the editors were quite happy to pick them up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had conversations with friends and colleagues of mine who have gone through PhD programs, and one thing that came up, and this was more on the computer science side though, was that the topic of Bitcoin is sort of almost too new to explore. And this is quite interesting because I want to contrast this with something you mentioned earlier, which was the idea of a horizon scan, which maybe we can talk about a little bit. But is there perhaps this kind of lag between universities, the academic system sort of picking up something quite new, which it isn't that new. I mean, it's been 15 years now, but the kind of tackling something like Bitcoin, having supervisors who are interested in that, working through a PhD topic on that, versus we just need to let it sort of simmer a little bit longer. I mean, do you see maybe there's a practical difference between those two, and even perhaps a political influence?
Yeah, I think, like, as a university professor, you normally recruit PhD students for particular projects. And sometimes you'll get a self-funded PhD student that comes in and, they want to do a project on, XYZ. So if it's something related to Bitcoin, then maybe if you have some remote interest in Bitcoin as the professor, maybe you're going to say, okay, let's just let this person go and we'll see what comes out of it. But typically you're coming in, I think a lot of people in Bitcoin don't understand what the incentives are in academia, and like the need to publish and the need to get research money, and that, a professor that gets a research grant doesn't make a whole bunch of, like, it's not a windfall profit for them. All that money goes into supporting postdocs and early career academic support. So you won't have, right now, like, there's no really major grants, like I said, that I know of that have been awarded for Bitcoin research. That will come. And like, there's no doubt that will come. But if you look, like, say, in the European Horizon grants, or to US National Science Foundation, or the equivalents in other countries, a decent sized research project is maybe like $5 million US over, say, 5 years, maybe more than that. and like money wise, say $5 to $7 million. And by the time you divide that up between all the different organizations and the researchers that are typically on a big grant like that, and then you get the student support that goes down, and you never quite know as a professor whether you hire somebody in as a student or a postdoc, and you never know if they're going to go through some sort of life crisis or how productive they're going to be or how long it's going to take them to get on board. So Bitcoin, like to have somebody just come on and hire somebody to do Bitcoin research, that's really risky for a professor. Like you have things that you want to, you have deliverables. Like when you get a research grant, there's all these deliverables that are all like spelled out, and you need to work through them, especially in the European system. You have a bit more flexibility in North America. But you want your students to be contributing to your research. A PhD program is supposed to be a mentorship, like it's learning how to do research. So you want a student, your ideal student is somebody that's quick, that catches on to things, that's interested in what you're interested in, maybe, but that is able to contribute and be relatively low maintenance. And, if you have somebody that wants to do constant Bitcoin research and like keeps pulling out the Bitcoin standard on you, your tolerance level might fall off. Like,
yeah, interesting. I guess though, at a more broad level, I mean, just amongst your colleagues and the institution generally, do you feel that there is perhaps subconsciously or overtly a kind of anti-Bitcoin sentiment or neutral sentiment towards the space generally, or?
Well, we've certainly seen some anti-Bitcoin sentiment in the academic, like in the journal articles that I've submitted. We've had some really snarky comments come back about, you're trying to tell us about how Bitcoin can make the world a better place, and I'm a chemical engineer, and I know that engineering makes the world a better place. That was a real one, and. Yeah, and we've had rejections by editors right off the bat. So the editorial process, there's a number of sort of hurdles that you have to get through. And the first one is getting past the editor-in-chief at a journal. And so we've had papers that have gone in and they just get rejected. And when an editor does what's called a desk rejection, so you get a desk rejection, you get no reason for it. It's just like, this doesn't fit with our journal, end of story. You have no way to appeal it or no way to modify it to meet any specific comments. So that could be some sort of, bias against Bitcoin. But it also could be that, you have to realize that all these journals that publish articles, everybody's in the competition, and the journal editors all want to like maximize the impact factor for their journal. So some of their decisions will be made, well, like, will a Bitcoin paper actually help my journal like get more citations and like sort of bump up the rank list a little bit, which is what their goal is. And it could well be that it's not necessarily any sort of prejudice. It's just that people don't understand Bitcoin and they don't see how potentially important it is in different fields.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I know certainly from, again, some of my other colleagues and friends working in other fields that it can be a bit of a superstar economy with the research, publishing to journals, and that it's sort of, there can be connections, there can be biases, and there is an incentive structure, as you said, that sort of it can be very problematic. And perhaps arguably this is where, I mean, there could be a bit of the underlying approach that Bitcoin has taken as an open source system, where anyone can do it. You can run it yourself. It sort of breaks down some of those power structures and hierarchies in a sense as a network.
Yeah, it certainly could. And there's all sorts of interesting things going on in sort of what's generally known as decentralized science. Unfortunately, they haven't picked up on Bitcoin too much from what I can see in that field. But there's definitely barriers. But like, I think my view on it right now is we're very, very early in the Bitcoin research sphere, and that as things pick up, I absolutely foresee, a few years down the road that we're going to have Bitcoin oriented departments, interdisciplinary, or maybe not departments in universities, but interdisciplinary Bitcoin-oriented research programs, like research centers. Like I could completely see that, assuming universities survive the AI age, which is another question.
Well, we've already seen, I believe it's called DARI, Digital Assets Research Institute. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, but they aren't a university research center or institute,
No, I
are they?
believe they're separate.
Yeah. So there's different sorts of think tanks around. I mean, there's efforts around to maybe get some research centers going. But again, you look to you take a proposal for a Bitcoin research center into like a vice president of the university responsible for research, and they're going to be interested in funding. Like it's like I don't know if a lot of people appreciate how much research is a business and universities are a business, and it's not just about teaching students how to do cool stuff and like think. That's part of it. Research is the butters the bread for universities, and until it can be demonstrated that Bitcoin research is something that really is able to attract grant funding, it will be difficult to get any real substantial amount of Bitcoin research done.
Yeah, that's interesting though. I was just been chatting with Andrew Bailey. Are you familiar with him?
Yep. I know there's something going on down at the University of Wyoming. And so I'm not super familiar with that. I know that there is a group down there that's actually funded by Charles Hoskinson from Cardano. And that's not what Andrew Bailey and colleagues are involved with. But it's one of these things that some of the private or some of the altcoins that have fairly big budgets where people have made money on them, they're able to fund different types of research centers. So I'm not really familiar with what the status on that is down in Wyoming. I know that there's something going on down there. We've had the idea for Satoshi Action. We've been batting it around now for about a year and a half about setting up a working group, a synthesis, like a virtual synthesis center as an alternative to like a university-based system, and facilitating funding and research. But the idea with synthesis centers is that you bring together researchers temporarily into working groups that maybe will span 3 or 4 in-person or virtual meetings over a couple of years. And these are super popular in the ecological and environmental sciences because they're very, very highly productive, and they don't take much time. Like from university faculty members, it's not a huge time drain. And so, plus they're a lot of fun. You get together and you get to chat about all sorts of things that normally you never have time to really chat about. And I think for Bitcoin, being able to bring like 10, 12, 14 interdisciplinary researchers into one space that comes up with a particular problem and then goes through and examines that over the space of a couple of years with some student and compute support could be a really interesting way to go. So there's advantages and disadvantages, like to having like a research center on a campus versus having a synthesis, like a virtual working groups that are like going forward with research. A lot of it has to do with data limitations, and there's data limitations that affect both sides of that. A lot of times the synthesis centers need to have existing data sets, and either for Bitcoin, we might not have those yet, or say like in the energy field, like with the different mining companies that want to, or that are willing to share mining data. Even if we had all that from all the relevant miners in one area, it can still be really difficult because those data curation and like, especially early on when you're trying to put together data sets that can be used for research later on, so much time goes into data construction, and that's really, really hard. Again, comes back to funding. It's really hard to fund that. It's not sort of sexy. You don't get the high profile publications coming out of it.
Yeah.
And so there's a challenge there. So there's different options that are floating around. Maybe somebody within a university will actually start to or maybe we'll see different universities that come up with different research programs that have Bitcoin components. The other option that I'm relatively positive about is that with enough expertise in the field, it might be possible to get Bitcoin-oriented academics sort of plugged into different bigger research projects. And by that, I'm thinking like a lot of the European Horizon series, or whatever they're calling it now, used to be Horizon 2020 when I was still working in academia. It's moved on from that. But these are typically big research programs with maybe up to 10 or 12 different academic and industry partners. And they'll have different components and different work packages. And I think it's very feasible that within a large like grid management or energy management program, that at some time there might be potential to slot in a Bitcoin work package if we had an interested academic researcher at one of the partner universities.
That's really fascinating, and I think the parallels that I see again, if we come back to the agriculture side, I certainly know New Zealand, North America. There's a lot of research on pesticides, fungicides, resistance issues, all of these things that you have with agriculture, but there's also quite a lot of practical outputs from that, sort of understanding how risk can be mitigated and novel solutions to actually overcoming these things, based upon rigorous science. And so I think it could be really interesting when there's research done, and it also kind of proposes maybe new ways Bitcoin mining or the Bitcoin network can help in a practical sense with some of these environmental challenges and energy infrastructure challenges. There could be some really good kind of outputs from that can be taken up by the industry.
Yeah. And I think when the academic light bulb goes on, that people are going to be going, oh my God, like what have we done? Like we've been ignoring this for so long, and there's so much opportunity in it. And academics are quite mercenary. I mean, they'll sort of follow what the trends are and like try to, because it's fundable. And when it's again, Bitcoin becomes fundable research, and then we'll have a lot of academics that start to like put the connect the dots and think, oh, today in the news there was an article about how energy is going negative pricing across Europe right now because there's excess renewable energy. And I mean, everybody in the Bitcoin space is like, roll out more miners, like get them in there, help with grid management, help with demand response, suck up all that energy that's being wasted during the times when the price goes really low or goes negative. Yeah. And my feeling is that when people start to clue in, when academics start to clue into that, and when research funders start to clue into that, there will be a lot of research money comes into the Bitcoin space. That might not be for 3, 4, 5 years yet, though, and it's hard to say, but at some time it's going to come.
Yeah, I do look forward to that. The proof of work coming out of all of these people focusing their efforts on Bitcoin-related topics. But Murray, I wanted to also ask you about your new website resource that you've been working on, which is the Bitcoin Distillery. Something you've launched recently. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about for a while. And what we decided to do was to basically create a clearinghouse that could summarize research information and also summarize what's going on in the Bitcoin social media space. So one of my horizon scanning projects last year, 2023, I think sort of the early days of AI, it's just amazing to think about like how much more difficult it was to do this work just a year ago. But last year I transcribed and interpreted, used AI assistants to interpret research gaps, information gaps, and research needs in the Bitcoin space based on YouTube interviews. And I think I did, I don't know what it was, 1,700 transcripts or something like that. And so I had a lot of experience with using AI to go through and do the first stages of analysis on transcriptions. And like for myself, I can't listen to all the stuff that's going on in YouTube and in podcasts right now. I try to sort of pick like some that I think will be like valuable to listen to, and I sort of skip through them, and that's probably pretty typical within the Bitcoin space. So the blog started with thinking, well, why not summarize these and like put them up and get them available for everybody? So if people can't listen to like a 60-minute or a 2-hour broadcast, maybe they can sort of get the key snippets out of the broadcast and what the broader implications are, and then go in and listen to the full broadcast if they want to. So that's one component of what we're doing. We're trying to get a lot of what's happening in the social media space and briefly summarize it, I'd say into about a 10-minute read normally for for a 1 hour to 90-minute podcast, and have it very structured where it's the same sort of structure every analysis that we do. Then the other components that I'm working on, and this is very much a work in progress right now, but I have research papers. So I'm working on like I mentioned, a reserve currency paper right now, and some macroeconomic stuff that is going on. So what I'm doing is I use AI to summarize research papers. So I throw in a PDF of some research article and I summarize it myself for my own use. And it's a way that I can screen down and sort of really quickly focus on where I should be doing more research. And I thought, well, let's throw those up online as well. So we have the social media summary, we have the research summaries. We've got some of the stuff that I've written one essay, but I also have some summaries of some of our own research work up on the site. And I'm just starting a sort of a short takes. My first post just went up actually a few hours ago on the market side. So what's going on, a lot of the YouTube channels, what they're like, they're like 20 minutes long. And so it's not really like a long form interview where you can go in and really sort of like tap into it for deeper insights. But I wanted to get something up. So we have some short takes as well on what's going on in the market and what the broader implications are. So the way I see it is, what I'm hoping is that we'll be a clearinghouse for Bitcoiners, where you can Bitcoiners that have interests in doing more than the superficial like AI newscast summary, something that really dives into a bit of detail about all these different pods and research articles, that they'll be able to go to one spot and have access to all of this material.
Yeah, that's quite awesome. And I think you might have even run one of my episodes through your distillery.
Yeah, I ran one of yours. And actually, I think if I look back to the research project, the horizon scanning project from last year, I think I probably got quite a few. Like I've probably got at least like 10 of yours in there, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's quite incredible. Like, I think it feels like the discourse for Bitcoin, this revolutionary technology, really is happening in this space. The conversations are on social media. Mainstream media are not picking it up, and so new ideas are being formed almost in a mimetic fashion, and it's really quite exciting to see that new paradigm in communication kind of take place real time.
Yeah, it is. And like in the past, we would have done that using text mining software, like a lot of these analyses, and you could pick up sort of what the evolving themes were. But now, like, it's pretty well, it's almost there in real time. And like, I'm not back to the blog. The other thing I'm doing is like, so everything that I have going onto the blog space or onto the blog is all stored away, of course, into a single data set. So now I can go in. We've already done this with Satoshi Action. It's like we're going in and prepping for meetings with potential donors, and we're doing the background donor research. So, what has so-and-so said about like Bitcoin? Have their views evolved over the last, year and a half or 2 years? What are their important issues that they're looking at? So we can do all this market research stuff too. That's not stuff that's actually on the blog post, but that's one of the reasons that we're doing this for. It's a free site right now. There's no subscription charges or anything like that. So we have this market research sort of component that will eventually be possible, but we also have a really, really interesting academic component to being able to keep up on this evolving discourse in more or less in real time. And like, for example, like just the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden, like fiscal dominance is coming to the forefront. Like, and there's just been all sorts of stuff coming out on it. Lynn Alden had a podcast on it. Jack Mallers had a pod on it just a couple of days ago. We're seeing it in some of the like the non-Bitcoin YouTube channels right now are also starting to talk a lot about fiscal dominance, which is basically the problem of government overspending, like the monetary policy, the central banks are trying to control inflation. The governments themselves are spending like crazy and like causing inflation. There's this like real tension between them.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. These topics sort of emerge. And I mean, certainly with coming back to the mining piece and the environmental side, the role of landfills and methane mitigation as well. And I mean, that was a little bit earlier, but that topic sort of, there was a kind of synchronicity as the light bulb went on for many people around about the same time. And there were a few thought leaders and different people in that space. But once the idea kind of gets disseminated, and certainly Bitcoiners generally I would characterize as being, very interested in what the latest thing that's happening and where the space is going. It's sort of the idea takes hold and it goes out there, and then it's maybe reviewed and there's pushback and critique. And so it's kind of like its own mini development process where ideas are challenged, they're put into the marketplace and explored. And there's an economic incentives to all of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fascinating sort of subject area, like as an academic researcher too, because there's, this is a very traditional area of research, but now what would have been done with manual text mining software, which was interesting in its own right, but it took a huge amount of like data, or time to get the data input for a text mining data set. And now with AI, it's just so much easier to do. It's just so much more feasible to do this in real time. And I tend to go in tangents. I had a PhD student that actually put me onto the software for text mining, and she was doing it with one of the big international banks, and they were running. This was about must have been 8 years ago, and they were running weekly focus groups and transcribing the focus groups from all around the world and bringing in and running it through text mining software and then identifying what the trends were. But that was a hugely expensive exercise. Like, she was working for a boutique consulting company in the UK. I have no idea what they were charging the bank, but it would have been pretty rich. Now, of course, with AI technology coming along, all of a sudden it's just making everything so much faster. And it's cutting the costs by who knows how much, 95%.
Yeah, and I just on that point, I guess using AI to kind of ingest large amounts of data and podcasts and different media and sort of summarize it, it's very interesting. But on the other side of that, what are your thoughts on using AI for actual generation of content or creation of these summaries and then putting that out there? Like, how do you see that kind of in the broader mediascape?
The way I view it is that you need a human front end and a human back end on it, but a lot of the middle section can all be done pretty well using automated tools and AI right now. So, and just for example, how I do them. So if I'm going to go through and run an analysis on this podcast, it takes numerous iterations. You can't just go through and just ask it a few simple questions. My prompt to run a podcast transcript right now is about 5 pages long, and I have an AI go through it multiple times, go through some of the same material multiple times and sort of narrow it down. And we start with keywords and sort of the big issues that are brought up, and then summaries, and then different summaries, and then go back again, make it so. The challenge, I find the challenge with AI. So I have an idea that I want to do. I know what I want. I know what the keywords sort of are that fall in for a particular genre of say, social media broadcasts or academic articles. And then I set up things up front, but then it's a matter of checking. So all my prompts, I constantly have gaps built into them. So it'll stop and I can check and I'll look and see if the, what's coming out looks reasonable. I can clarify things, then start up again and proceed forward. And then at the end, of course, it takes a good review and to go in and really see if it's credible or not. And ultimately, the way the tools are right now, with the automation potential, you can sort of assemble everything together. You can have the drafts pretty well made up. I find it takes me probably takes me 15 minutes to run, 15, 20 minutes to run a full analysis right now. And most of that time is actually relating to cutting and pasting and making sure the format is right. I don't have everything fully automated as far as formatting go. Hopefully I'll have that in a little bit. But what happens is if I can get 20 minutes that will go through and summarize a podcast, then that gives me the time to actually go through and verify as I need to, and to do the extra stuff that is needed to follow up, make sure everything sort of fits together. And with research articles, that's even more so, because the research articles is more like, if you're going to cite something in a research report, you don't want to rely on an AI summary of the article just in case it messes up something and gets something completely wrong, which will happen sometimes, especially in the methodology and the results. But it's still I look the way I was saying, just telling somebody this reserve currency project that I'm working on right now. I'm not a macroeconomist, so I don't have training in macroeconomics, and I don't have a really good understanding of inflation and how sort of all the macro components fit together. So I'm learning just like everybody else is in the Bitcoin space. And if I go through and I have an academic paper, and if I would print off a hard copy, take it out to a coffee shop, read it, try to digest it, go back to it the next day, go back to it maybe a week later. I mean, it could take me weeks to get through something that the initial report that really puts me on focus, I get that in 15 minutes now.
Yeah, it's an incredible productivity tool, and I think people are beginning to realize its use cases. Yeah. And it seems there's a lot of connections with Bitcoin as well. Now, if people want to find the Bitcoin Distillery, how can they find it, Murray?
It is murrayrudd.pro.
Nice. Yeah, you can go to murrayrudd.pro and check that out. Cool. Well, that's been awesome to hear about sort of what you're working on, Murray, and how this evolving space, this emerging space of Bitcoin is being looked at. I know you worked with, on one of these publications, you worked with Dr. Simon Collins from New Zealand, who was able to introduce us. And it seems like more and more there's this emerging interest from the academic world and people who've come from the academic world looking at Bitcoin and what it could mean. So it seems like, very exciting times. In terms of the future, though, I mean, it's sort of low time preference, but is there anything in particular that's on your horizon at the moment that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, well, we have on the academic paper side, we have a methane landfill modeling paper that's in review right now. So that was something that Satoshi Action did with Nodal Energy out of Utah. The guys from Nodal, Matt and Daniel, participated and are co-authors in the paper. Daniel Batten's also a co-author on that. He came in a little bit later, sort of help give some context on what's going on internationally. So that paper is in second review right now. So we had it come back. We got it back from the journal. So it went out for review. It got past the editorial hurdle. It went out to review. It came back from review and it wasn't rejected, which is always a good thing. And then we had major revisions to do in the paper. I did those, sent it back in, and it's been sent out for review for a second time. So I'm hoping that we'll be hearing, have a final verdict right now on that paper. It's been reviewed at the Journal of Cleaner Production, which is a pretty good journal. And I'm hoping maybe within a month, maybe 6 weeks, that we'll hear something on that one. So that's coming right now. We have a interesting discount rate paper and time preference paper, actually, that I've been working on. And I just invited a number of Bitcoin academics to come on as co-authors to sort of really help fill out the gaps in these areas where I figure a big group is probably more proficient at really making a more sophisticated paper out of this one. And so we got Simon Collins, again, helping out in that. We have a number of other people. There's a couple of people that helped out. I had a special Bitcoin issue in the Journal Challenge us last year, and so there was a couple of the authors from articles in that are helping out. And we also have, it looks like somebody coming on sort of from the industry practitioner side that is really has a lot of expertise about discount rates. So that's coming as well. We're from a Satoshi Action perspective. We have, I'm working on something about Bitcoin as a reserve asset, and that will probably be wrapped in. I've also done a portfolio allocation report internally. So we'll probably have that combining with probably the reserve asset portfolio management, and then that will also link in with some of the horizon scanning work that I've had. I sort of, a lot of times when I write, I put things out as working papers. So the methane paper is already up in public access as a working paper. And with working papers, a lot of times I'll sort of repurpose them along the way or pull parts from one and combine it all to another. So we have this reserve portfolio allocation macroeconomic orientation paper that's in the works right now too. We get a lot of feedback. Dennis gets a lot of feedback from a lot of the meetings that they have with different state legislators in the US. So we have some work that we're looking at that relates to very much fit into the US policy world. And we're also really, really interested in going and doing some international adoption research work. And so we've been talking to a few people about the potential for funding a project like that. And that's something I would love to be able to go in and do survey-based research, looking at the determinants of adoption and how, like, what the different pathways to successful Bitcoin adoption are in different parts of the world and under different sort of macro and political contexts. And it's not, I don't think from a survey perspective, it's not all that difficult, like academically or from a research perspective, it's not all that difficult to do, but it's a fairly pricey project because you're probably looking at some fairly big international internet surveys, which have to go through the big panel providers that do international panel provision.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I know when I spoke with Simon Collins recently, he shared his work on taxonomy of Bitcoin adoption. Which
we got that one too.
Certainly,
it's starting to get like normal academia. Like I had a bit of time off, like after I left, and now I'm up to the stage now where I'm forgetting which stuff I actually have going on. I have a list of everything, and so it's good to see. Most of the work that I'm involved with right now is still in these perspectives and opinion pieces, though. Their ideas sometimes in academia they can be referred to quite in a derogatory way as ideas papers, but ideas papers really work and they're very important. They have their role. They aren't the hardcore empirical research that really provides the evidence base, but they, the way a lot of my writing I view is I'm trying to educate researchers. Like I'm trying to educate academics. Like, let's just get this Bitcoin thing out in front of them. And once they clue into what the possibilities are, then maybe they'll be the ones that are in the position to actually do the research grants and get research funding for the bigger empirical projects.
Yeah, that's orange pilling at a university level.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's what it would be.
So we all struggle, friends, family, fellow academic colleagues. I mean, it is a challenge, but I think normalizing it, talking about it, being objective, and just having a methodology to it's really important. And it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is helping with that, Murray. So it's awesome work, and I look forward to hopefully this methane piece you're working on is I look forward to seeing that come out in the journals and all of these other projects. But look, Murray, I do appreciate your time. If people want to find you generally, I know you mentioned the Bitcoin Distillery website. Is there anywhere else people can find you or follow your work?
Yeah, Satoshi Action has a website, and just let me it's satoshiaction.org. And then the other way to follow is, or to sort of keep pace with what's going on in Satoshi Action and Satoshi Action Fund and Satoshi Action Education is to just give Dennis Porter a follow. I mean, I'm on X as well, but like, I don't have much of a social media presence, whereas he has a large presence.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, I do appreciate your time, Murray, and I look forward to everything you're doing, and good luck with that, and let's keep in touch.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Thanks very much, Cody.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. I do hope you enjoyed the show. I am Cody Ellingham, and that was the Transformation of Value. If you would like to get in touch, please send me an email at hello@thetransformationofvalue.com, and I will get back to you.